Everything was white around me in a serene atmosphere. And there, without any hesitation, I became aware that I had just died. It was very beautiful. Then I returned in full speed into this light. There I met my paternal grandfather, who died in 1984. Immediately after this, it was before the Easter weekend of 2009. I felt very tired. I had like punctures in my heart and the chest, and I heard something like water flowing in my body. Very strange sensation. I was short of breath and had to sleep almost in a sitting position. It was impossible for me to lie down. So, I decided to contact my doctor, but it was impossible for him to take me before 48 hours. Considering my condition, I got an appointment with a country doctor who took me immediately. Her diagnosis: gastric flu. She prescribed acetaminophen, despite a vasovagal episode, brief loss of consciousness. At her practice, she told me to come back if it became worse. My condition got much worse. I was sleeping in a sitting position that made it impossible to lie down without cutting my breathing. I heard something like water gurgling in my throat. The pain in the chest was so violent that it didn't let me sleep for at least 2 days. So I took 1 gram of acetaminophen every 2 hours, which made me fall into a heavy sleep for about 45 minutes. After this very long weekend, a funny feeling overwhelmed me. I felt death, and I knew that I had to react. I told my ex-partner that it was time to prepare. It was time that I got to the hospital. On the other hand, during my experience, I have no memory of being in contact with animals. Concerning plants, I had a strange contact. Following the words that my grandfather had told me about the fact that my children still needed me, I decided to visit them at home. I arrived in the garden through the roots of a tomato plant. I could see its molecules, its health condition that seemed perfect to me. I saw the flowers to be and fruits, and if this had not been the case, I had the impression of being able to improve its condition in order to obtain beautiful fruits. I then found myself in the house. My family, my mother, my children, and their mother were sitting at the table. They were very anxious about my condition. They were looking for a key that I had been putting away in a small piece of furniture in the kitchen. At that moment, I found myself set back from the scene. I indicated to them the exact location of the key, but nobody could hear me. Then I found myself again in the light with my grandfather, who made me aware of the suffering of my children. I had to do a second displacement. I found myself in the practice of my doctor. My mother was in the middle of the corridor. She was talking to the doctor. She was treating him as a bungler. And if I was in hospital between life and death, it was his fault. This scene happened in front of the dumbfounded eyes of his secretary. I myself was behind my mother and told her repeatedly that it was not his fault, but she didn't hear it. Again, back with my grandfather, I found myself sitting by a table with a council in the company of several deceased persons of my family, which I still have difficulties to identify. My grandfather led this council. There I was shown my past life. I had access to the purpose of my life. This council was organized only with the goal to come back to Earth, something that, at that time, I didn't consider at all. Then they started to show me the life of my children without me, and they showed me the life that I would be living when coming back to Earth. My children would be happier, professional lives, more in accordance with myself, a craftsman trade, creative, and independent. After this, they finally convinced me of a necessary return for the following experience and the well-being of my children. Then I felt, again, being on this surgery table, overwhelmed by an unprecedented pain in my chest. I had to inhabit my body again, much too narrow in comparison to the space I was occupying. I was everything, and once again in my too small body with this unbearable pain. I came to after 4 days of coma. I tried to tell my story immediately, but unfortunately, none of the medical personnel wanted to listen. Just my partner was able to listen. Thanks to this, I still have partial traces of what I experienced, as over the hours my memory of this event was fading, and I'm convinced that I lost much information and details. Nevertheless, I'm happy having had this experience and to share it today with you. I decided to go again to see my country doctor. Upon my arrival, her face froze. She understood the seriousness of my condition and asked me if I could go immediately to the emergency of the nearest hospital at Gray. Upon arrival at the hospital, they took care of me immediately. Major respiratory distress, only 5% of pulmonary capacity. I was placed on oxygen after receiving x-rays of the lungs. Again, I had a terrible night because of the pain. Then I was finally transferred to the hospital center of the university. At my arrival there, my condition was even worse, so I found myself in the intensive care unit. After several tests and ultrasound of the heart, there had to be urgent surgery of the pericardium. The doctor present at my examination told me in what condition my heart was, as per the ultrasound test. We were in front of a large black mass with a small white point, and then he said, "You see the black mass? That's a water pouch surrounding your heart, and the small white dot is your heart, so there is high urgency to operate on you." It was also at that moment that he was astonished that the country doctor could diagnose gastric flu, while my heartbeats were almost inaudible. He finished telling me not to worry, as this is a simple and benign intervention, that by chance they had a great cardiologist on hand, and that he would take care of me. Following all this, I was taken to the surgical unit around 2200 p.m. Just before my arrival, the surgeon was already there. He was waiting for me. He introduced himself and explained to me that he would remove some of the water that was compressing my heart. He reassured me and asked me not to be scared. At that moment, I wasn't scared. I just had, again, a strange feeling and was aware of death. Inside the surgery unit, everybody was busy around me, to change me from my bed, and thus from my sitting position to the surgery table. There, the anesthetist was trying to get me to lie down, and not to struggle to remain sitting, but to get down flat on the table. There I had those words that still resonate in my head: "If I lay down, I will die." He looked reassuringly at me. Well, I'd do it, and the more I was getting down, the less I was able to breathe. I still had this horrible pain in my chest. Finally, I was completely elongated on the table, and there. Suddenly my vision went white, and by whatever miracle, no pain anymore. I found myself in a completely white environment, very bright, of an extreme intensity, quasi-indescribable. I didn't see with my eyes anymore. All was white, but I was aware that I was sitting again on this surgery table, in this unit, in this hospital. I was astonished. Then I had the intention of moving and to look at my hands, and there, very strange, I felt the stream of air passing between my fingers. I felt that my arms were moving, but I didn't see them as you see them with your eyes, but I was aware of those movements in the position and place where I was. Everything was white around me in a serene atmosphere, and there, without any hesitation, I became aware that I had just died. Immediately after this, I felt moving at hallucinatory speed, circling in the room, making ever bigger circles. I found myself in a room at the right side of the unit, probably the restroom of the surgeons. There I saw a table with lunch, chicken leftovers, with bottles of good quality wine, and wrappings from a caterer. All this amused me, and I even thought that the doctors didn't let themselves down, and that they were able to have good lunches at their workplace. At the moment of the experience, I was well aware where I was. I felt a well-being that I had never known before. I felt light, and my pain that made me suffer for several days, gone. There was only happiness. I didn't feel any fear about this situation. I felt free and decided to have fun with this. I had this strange sensation of being able to be everywhere at the same time. I had the sensation to be universal energy. For me, the universal energy is the energy that animates every living creature on Earth. For a better understanding, imagine two levels. The first level is on Earth where we are now, and the second one you have to imagine above our heads. Much like an immense ocean of energy that is filling us more or less, depending on the physical capacity of everybody. For example, I need a strong visual correction nevertheless. As soon as I left my body, I could see instantly what I wanted to see, and the same was for hearing and all other human senses. Same as, I suddenly wanted to see if the sun was shining on the Maya temples in Mexico. I didn't have time to finish formulating my wish when I was at the foot of a pyramid, excited to see that the sun really was shining on this Maya site. It was very beautiful. I hardly had time to observe a butterfly that at my arrival was flying away. Then I returned in full speed into this light. There I met my paternal grandfather who died in 1984. He was my guide during my experience. I told him that I was happy for not feeling myself so narrow in my body. I was no more frustrated, not hating, not in jealousy, meaning all those earthly human feelings. He explained to me that it was not the moment for me to be there, and that I had to make a return back to Earth into that body. Indeed, being in this state is a big liberation. One is experiencing sensations that are difficult to verbalize.